Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. My name is Jenny Bright, and I am in charge of programs for the South Pasadena High School PTSA. All three of my children are currently attending SPHS. For all of you joining us now from other school districts in the LA area and beyond, welcome. And a special welcome to the students who are here in attendance. I heard many of you are watching with your siblings and parents. Thank you for coming. So tonight we're going to dive into the new synthetic street drugs that have recently appeared on the scene and have been circulating in growing numbers in our communities. We're hoping this information will help to keep them from making their way into our student circles. So first, we'll be speaking with Ed Ternan of Song for Charlie about the immediate danger and potential lethality presented by fentanyls. He'll explain that to you. Following that, we'll take a few minutes to hear from Sadie Metcalf from the LA County Department of Health about mental health resources. And finally, we will speak with author Sam Quinones, who will give us a broader perspective of the growth, supply chain, and distribution of these new synthetic drugs. So, Ed, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Jenny. I hope you guys can all hear me. I'm going to share my screen and show you some slides, assuming that I can figure out how to do that. I want to thank the people at South Pass for having me here. Mary and I raised our family in South Pasadena. We lived there from 1990, when our oldest son Eddie was born, until we moved to Pasadena around 2018. So this is, for me, this is kind of like playing in front of my home crowd. And I appreciate the opportunity to share my family story with you. So I'm going to share this screen. And I think that's going to be okay. And I want you guys to tell me what you see when I do this. Oops, wrong one, right?
That is the wrong one. Yep.
So let me try that again. Share this one. Boom.
That looks great, Ed. Thanks.
That better? Okay, thanks you guys. So we're here today to talk about the fake pills that have flooded the market that are unfortunately taking the lives of many young people, my son Charlie included. That's the bottom line. This is the message that I want to get across to the parents and the kids in the audience. These fake pills, really, they're everywhere these days. And it's gotten to the point where if you come across a pill, like at a party or in the gym or online, you just have to assume that it's not real. There are drug traffickers working very hard to manufacture what look like legitimate prescription pills like Xanax, Percocet, and oxycodone that we're all familiar with, that kids are familiar with, that in some cases they've been prescribed in the past, but they're not real. They're made of a very powerful opioid called fentanyl. And a lot of kids are dying by taking these pills that they think are safe that turn out to be deadly. So let me start by telling you our story. We learned this the hard way. This is my youngest son, Charlie. Charlie grew up on Milan Avenue, just north of Monterey Road, with his older brother and older sister. We do the Catholic thing. So Charlie went to Holy Family School, and then Loyola High School, and then off to Santa Clara University. And that's where he was when he died. Charlie came home during COVID in March of 2020 and sheltered in place with us. You know, one of those kids who came home from spring break and the university said, don't come back. So he was here with us for about 6 months before he and his friends decided, you know what, we're going to go back and spend some time together. It's just been too long, and we're going to be graduating college pretty soon, and heck, we may never see each other or not for years, and let's just go back and spend the last month together. And so they did that. And a few days after being up there, Charlie was in his room at the fraternity house. He couldn't go out with the rest of his buddies because he had a job interview on the phone that afternoon. So he went on Snapchat, and he was planning to get some Xanax to chill out and play some video games, which we learned later is not uncommon. And he said to his friend, look, this guy's got Percocet too. I'm going to get one of those. My back is killing me. Charlie had back surgery a couple years ago, famously complained about his back. And what we know is that the last time anybody talked to him was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And we know for sure that he never made the 5 o'clock phone call for his job interview. So sometime between 3 and 5, he took the Percocet, which was one of those N30s, and he never woke up. He was dead within 15 minutes or so. So Mary and I get a knock on the door. And on a Thursday night at 10 o'clock, there's been an accident in Santa Clara, and Charlie's dead. And our response was, what? You got to be kidding. What are you talking about? Well, we think it's pills. Well, Charlie didn't have a substance use disorder. He had just lived with us for 6 weeks. Everybody was stressed out about COVID, but he was acting normally, behavior. There were no warning signs of any substance issues or depression or mental health issues. So we were shocked about that. And the next day we got a call from law enforcement up in Santa Clara where Charlie died. And they said, we'll have to wait for the tox report, but we're pretty sure this is fentanyl. We're seeing this a lot. So we get online and we're typing like crazy, trying to figure out what the heck is fentanyl. And we find that on page 6 of the San Jose Mercury News, there's an article that there's these pills floating around, and it's been on the local TV 5 o'clock news, and the DEA and the medical examiner and the sheriff's department all had bulletins on their website. Fentanyl is starting to kill people in the Bay Area. And Mary and I looked at each other and we said, kids don't read the newspaper. That's not where they get who's telling the kids about this? Because the first responders and the cops and the ER techs and all those people that we spoke to, their eyes are bugging out saying, this is getting really bad. Kids are dying all over the place. Kids just like every kid you see on the screen here. Every single one of these kids was in middle school or high school and died after taking a single pill, and in some cases a half a pill, that they thought was a safe Xanax or Oxy or Percocet. Most of them died in their own bed, in their parents' home. That's a disaster, you guys. You don't want this to happen to you. This is a disaster, and it's happening. I want to show you a few slides that'll demonstrate that it's happening here. It's happening now. It's in your neighborhood. It's happening to your friends and family. Everybody's at risk of this because young people don't understand. So Mary and I said, we got to tell the kids. We got to go where the kids are. So we reached out to the social media companies. We started working with Snapchat. You know, they're headquartered here in Southern California. We know people who work there. They're not in Silicon Valley. We have other families who are connected with people at Facebook. They made an introduction there. And when we explain to people what's really going on, that this is not drug dealing as usual, that this is deception, it's fraud, that these kids are being marketed something, sold something under false pretenses as something safe and familiar that's actually deadly, people's mouths drop. And they say, we need to fix this. We want to help. So our strategy is to take the message, the warning messages, directly to kids as we can by going on social media, which is where they are, and into schools, and to speak their language, to create engaging content for young people, and warn them as fast as we can that these fake pills have flooded the market. Now, this next slide, I want to play a video. This is about 2 minutes, and it's a news report that we did with Snapchat. And they put it out on their platform. And I think in about 2.5 minutes, this does a really good job of summarizing the problem in a way that we can all relate to.
2020 set a new record for drug overdoses in the United States, up 30% from the previous year. You might think that this is just a dark byproduct of the pandemic, but it's more than that. Thousands of Americans, especially teenagers and college kids, are dying by accident because they're buying and taking black market prescription painkillers that are secretly laced with fentanyl. One of them was Charlie Ternan, just 22 years old, from Los Angeles. He died suddenly last May, playing video games by himself on a random Thursday afternoon after taking a counterfeit Percocet he bought online. His dad said it happened fast.
Charlie died after taking a single prescription pill. He thought he was getting a Percocet online.
That's not what he got. What he got was what we call a fentanyl, a counterfeit prescription pill made of fentanyl. The doctors tell us Charlie probably died in about 15 minutes after taking the pill.
Charlie's parents, Ed and Mary Ternan, started this group, Song for Charlie, to raise awareness about the risks of buying prescription pills like oxycodone, Xanax, even Adderall from random dealers on the internet.
Every morning, Mom Mary Ternan comes to her in-home memorial to look at photos and remember her son Charlie.
It was really hard to first look at these pictures right after Charlie died. But it's really important to keep his soul and his presence alive.
Charlie was a big dude, 6'2", 235, but he never had a chance. Because even a trace amount of fentanyl in a pressed pill can kill you almost immediately.
Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid 80 to 100 times more powerful than morphine. Drug cartels lace pills like Oxycontin or Adderall with it because it's cheaper and easier to transport. People then buy them on the street not knowing what they're getting.
Mexican drug cartels, not some Breaking Bad dudes down the street in the garage, are making these shady pills, and they're making bank.
And no one knows how much fentanyl is in each pill. It's a game of Russian roulette.
No one knows the quantity because they're made in clandestine labs. They're filthy labs. The dosing is really inconsistent. And it's a deadly game experimenting and taking these drugs.
Pressing these pills is just printing bills for these guys. They can make them for pennies and sell them for 20 bucks. Do the math.
What can you do about all this? Assume any pill you come across, online, at a party, at the gym, is fake and might have fentanyl in it. And don't believe anyone who says you can test for fentanyl in a pressed pill. You actually can't. And as for the most important piece of advice, well, listen to Charlie's dad.
Tell your friends. It's up to you to protect your friends from this problem. Take it from me. You don't want this to happen to anybody you know. Spread the word. One pill can kill.
So one pill can kill has become the rallying cry of all the families who have been affected by this problem. And we're convinced that awareness is the highest impact thing that we can do. We have to tell young people about this new risk because it's a new dynamic. And, you know, Sam is the expert and he's going to get into more of this later, I hope. And I've learned a lot of this from reading Sam's books, but you know, what parents need to understand especially, but also the kids, is this is totally different. The fact that fentanyl is synthetic means it can be kind of, there's an unlimited supply. If you need to make more, you just add a night shift. It's not relying on any crop. So the supply demand dynamic is completely different now, right? And the new business model is not, it's basically like, let's find the strongest raw material we can to extend our batch yield so that just a little bit of this fentanyl goes a really long way and makes a bunch of pills, right? But the problem is when you spread it that thin, you can't control the dosage. And so, but all of this is done to maximize the profits of the drug traffickers. And if some kids die, in some of their customers die, in the process, they've made so much money that that's an acceptable business risk to them. They don't really care. So one of the things that we did with Snapchat is they commissioned a market research study. They surveyed about 1,500 young people across the country. And the insights that we gained there are really, I think, very useful. And I want to share them with you. Because the other thing is a lot of the young people who are dying, especially from the counterfeit pills, they're not always party deaths. As a matter of fact, most of them are kids seeking relief. They're trying to get a good night's sleep. They're, you know, a little stressed out. They're anxious, and they think these pills are safe, and so they turn to these pills. And they trust social media, and they trust their friends. So, you know, 79%, as you can see on the slide, say that stress and anxiety is why they might use a prescription pill. 13% of teens say that they have actually taken a pill off prescription, but they know that more kids than that do it. Now, the problem is that only 35% of them don't know enough about fentanyl when they're asked the question, how dangerous do you think fentanyl is? They couldn't answer. And 73% of teenagers don't know that fentanyl is in counterfeit pills. And what strikes me about this one is, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but when they asked them what drugs are dangerous, they rated fentanyl about the same danger as cigarettes. So we have a lot of work to do to tell kids that fentanyl is really dangerous and that it's everywhere. And that's really what they have to worry about. Because pill taking is normalized. I'm sorry, parents, might not want to hear this, but our kids are used to taking pills. They see them in our medicine cabinets. They've been prescribed them for their wisdom teeth or their sports industry injury. They know what they do to them. They know how they make them feel, and they will take them recreationally to experiment and try something or to relieve their stress. At the same time, they don't know that these fake pills are so dangerous. And as a result, this is Los Angeles County. Let's bring it home. This is right here where we live. Starting from left to right, the white is 2019, the latest numbers we have. The yellow is 2020. All drug deaths in Los Angeles County, right here where we left, went in 1 year from 29 to 74 among kids aged 15 to 19. In Los Angeles County, 63 of those 74 deaths were fentanyl. Most kids that age haven't graduated to the needle yet. There are people who are addicted to heroin and or long-term problems with substance use, polysubstance abuse, who are dying because fentanyl is in the drug supply also, right? But a 15 to 19-year-old, we can guess that most of those 63 deaths were in the form of a pill. And when you ask the kids what is dangerous, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but they move back from right to left. They rate the dangerous drugs that they're aware of in this order: heroin, meth, and coke. But young high school kids are dying from fentanyl X times more than they are of those drugs combined. And when you look at the growth, the change in the death rate, 15 and 16-year-olds are by far the highest impacted age group of the increase in fentanyl involved drugs. These are high school kids. So the game's changed. When we were growing up, parents, teachers, we were told, given the drug talk, it was like a journey. It was like a path. And the danger was you could get off on the wrong path. And if you did, you might start out trying a few things and then kind of settle into, well, this is what I like, I'll smoke a little pot and with my white wine or whatever, and you're an occasional user of recreational drugs. But the warning was, you don't want to make it a habit, because if you do, it's going to have a negative impact on your life. And in one day, you may go so far to be dependent on that substance. And the risk there is that you'll accidentally, at some point, take too much of your drug of choice and die of an accidental overdose. Of course, according to that narrative, there's always opportunities to intervene. Most people age out of their risky behavior. And if they don't, there's chances for the friends and family to step in and say, listen, you got to knock it off, you got to slow down, or maybe you got to go to rehab. My kid never got that chance. There's other parents on this call whose kids will never know. We will never know how they would have settled into their relationship with substances as they got older, which is something we all have to do in this country. They never got the chance because they were poisoned by these counterfeit pills. We never used the word overdose in this context because you cannot overdose on a single pill. These kids are poisoned by something being sold something under false pretenses. And as a result, instead of thinking of the drug landscape as kind of a journey, it's more today like a minefield, where if you don't know what's going on, your next step could be your last. And that's why we have such a sense of urgency about getting to the kids as quickly as we can and taking all the friction out, all the noise aside, and just tell the kids. We're laser focused on that. And I want to stress this. Again, this comes from the market research. Kids are turning to these pills to escape, for relief. 7 out of 10 kids in the survey rated their stress level at least a 7 out of 10. A 7 out of 10. 46%, half of them say, I'm stressed out at 7 out of 10. And 86% said their peers are feeling overwhelmed, but 71% say they don't want to talk about mental health. This is the root cause of the problem of the kids these age that we believe we need to get behind. We want to figure out, we want to give kids healthier alternatives for coping with stress. It's no longer a nice to have. Our kids need to be taught and learn healthy, sustainable coping skills, because two things are not going to change in their lifetime: stress levels and synthetic drugs. Those two things are here to stay. And so we all have to work together as families to learn how we're going to handle that. Now I'm going to close with this. What can you do about it? Well, the first thing you need to do as families, as parents, as teachers, as students, you need to bone up on this subject. You need to understand what's going on in the drug landscape today. And the other thing is, you need to understand what's going on with social media. This is where these transactions take place, people, right? In Sam's first book, he pointed out that the heroin trade was revolutionized because drug traffickers will always turn to the technology of the day. And in those days, it was pagers, beepers. You parents remember those? The kids don't even know what that means. Today, it's social media. This is where kids get together, they transact, they communicate, they interact. The dealers know this, and the dealers have figured out how to get to your kids. So you need to know, if your kid has Snapchat, you need to have Snapchat. You need to understand how that app works. You understand their policies, how to toggle on and off the different features. It's very important. Kids, parents, call it out. We understand, we hear sad stories of people who pass away because their friends don't want to snitch. And this is not some behavior, selling these pills, buying these pills, taking pills that you get online. That is not something that, please don't let my parents find out, I'll be grounded. That's not that level of activity. It's not cool. They're putting your friends at risk. Don't tolerate it. There are ways you can report these on Snapchat and TikTok and other platforms anonymously. Nobody will ever know that you reported that activity. So we're hoping that we can change the mindset of young people, that we can make pill taking and pill sharing uncool, that it's kind of looked at the way smoking or drunk driving is looked at today. Yeah, it still happens, but it's a lot more rare than it used to be. And the other thing is, I'm hoping that people will get more comfortable talking about their stress and anxiety. And it's a good time to do it because in this COVID world, we're all stressed. So you're not alone, right? So it's okay to talk about how you feel. And the other thing is, spread the word. You can go to our website and take the No Random Pills pledge. You gotta tell all your friends. I always use this analogy here in the West, in California, we're used to wildfires, right? And this reminds me of the idea of, the scenario where the fire chief calls the mayor of the town and says, the fire is between us and you. We're working as fast as we can to get to you, but we're not going to get to you in time. You have to save yourself. Kids need to get together and say, we're not going to tolerate this behavior from our peers. We're going to tell everybody we know about these fake pills. We're going to stay away from them. Parents, you need to support that. That's what we think will solve this problem. And we need to solve it now, because it's going to take society a while to figure out these new dynamics. And in the meantime, a lot of kids are going to die if we don't spread the word. So that's what we're all about. And I really appreciate you guys listening to me. And I'm totally shocked that I did that in less than 22 minutes.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you.
So before we talk to Sam, I'd like to take a few minutes to hear from Sadie Metcalf. Sadie is the youth advisor with the LA County Department of Public Health and a representative from the SPHS Student Health and Wellness team. Sadie is also a student at South Pasadena High School and is here tonight to outline the available mental health resources, which is a very important thing to understand. Sadie?
Yeah, let me just pull up my presentation. Okay. We're just going to jump right into it. Thank you, Ed, for that presentation. I really appreciate hearing your story. And I do want to outline some of the wellness resources to prevent fentanyl poisoning and opioid use. Okay, so my counterpart isn't here today, but her name is Lauren Yee, and I'm Sadie Metcalf. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a senior at South Pasadena High School. I'm this year's health and wellness officer, so we advocate for student health and wellness at school. I'm also the peer mediators liaison, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then I'm also the Department of Public Health County, LA County Youth Advisor. So I work closely with public health staff to advocate for youth issues, especially surrounding mental health. Before we get into the presentation, I do want to give a quick content warning. I will be mentioning suicide, sexual harassment and assault, and substance abuse and use. So feel free to take a breather at any point during this pretty short presentation. So before I jump in, I do want to establish a connection. Ed started for sure on establishing this connection between substance use and mental health. Drug use typically starts in adolescence, a period when the first signs of mental illness commonly appear. So kids are reaching out to help their mental health with substances. The maturity of the brain or the lack thereof contributes to more serious substance abuse disorders in the future. So we have to stop substance use now to prevent substance abuse in the future. And then numerous studies have documented an increased risk for substance use disorders in youth with untreated mental health issues. So without treatment for mental health issues, kids think that substance use is a way to help treat that. And it's really important to prevent mental health issues, to later prevent substance use and even further fentanyl poisoning. So again, I want to just establish what mental health is. I'm sure we've heard this term a lot in the past year, but it does include our emotional, psychological, and social well-being, and it affects how we think, feel, and act. It also determines how we handle stress, relate to others, and make choices. And positive mental health allows people and students to realize their full potential, to healthy actions and coping with the stresses of life, also working productively and making meaningful contributions to their communities. So one way that we can prevent substance use and fentanyl poisoning is by using the mental health resources that we have. On campus, we have a lot of available and accessible mental health resources for students. And then also there's a lot of off-campus hotlines that are specific to different kinds of mental health disorders. So I just want to show these graphics. We recently conducted a mental health and wellness survey. And these were a couple of the questions that we asked. So the first graph on the left shows that people know that they can see their counselors for non-academic concerns, but the graph on the right shows that they haven't been using their counselors for non-academic concerns. So I do just want to elaborate and point out that the SPHS counselors are a great resource for students to talk about mental health. They're here for academic needs like scheduling, but they're also really here to help your students with their mental health. In order to contact the counselors, students can email or just visit them during school hours in the counseling office. They have access to a lot of mental health resources and also they can also refer to other mental health professionals on campus and off campus. And then one of those mental health professionals is our social worker. Her name's Miss Prime. She's also very much here for students' mental health needs. She's also in the counseling office, and students can email her to make appointments. Ms. Prime is here to personally talk to students about their mental health needs and can also refer students to other mental health resources. So the SPHS ASB Wellness Team, that's me. We're super here for students. We're here to advocate for their health and wellness, to the administration, to the PTA, to the school board, and to the student body. So we're really easy to find. You can find us at school, email, text, or through Instagram. And then on campus are the peer mediators. So the peer mediators are a really great group of students on campus who are dedicated to advocating for student wellness. They're also trained in conflict resolution, so you can find them to conduct student mediations and also peer support sessions. You can find them during first period in room 316 or reach out to me or Aurelia Olguin, who is the other peer mediator liaison. They also conduct a lot of stress relief and advocacy projects. So part of that is, publications like the mini magazine that we publish each month. We also do a blog about systemic issues on campus. And then we also do a lot of advocacy projects that are meant to provide spaces to students to speak about mental health or about other issues impacting their lives. There is so many hotlines online for students to talk to. I'm not going to talk about all of them because there's a lot, but I am going to put this link in the chat in just a second that has a lot of hotlines that are available for students to access at all times. And that kind of concludes my really short presentation, but I just want students to remember and parents to remember that people are here for you and your students. There are ways to access these people and their hair to help you. So let me just drop the link in the chat, and that just concludes presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sadie. That was very helpful information. So our final speaker for the evening is Sam Quinones. Sam is a New York Times best-selling author and LA Times journalist who has just released his latest book entitled The Least of Us. Sam has traveled all across the United States, hitting the ground to visit the very communities that have been most crushed by addiction. He has gathered these personal stories so that the rest of us can have a window into these newer street drugs. Also stories of people who are working to make their communities better places to live. Tonight, he will give us a broader perspective about how they are impacting not just LA, but the rest of the country as well. Sam, thanks for giving us your time tonight.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So after your work in Dreamland, researching the legal OxyContin pills and the damage that they did, what are you seeing now that is different with the pills that are currently in circulation?
Well, thank you, Jenny, and hello to everybody from South Pasadena. As many of you know, we have lived in South Pasadena. We're now in Nashville for the year, but my wife Sheila Tully was PTA president of Arroyo Vista a couple of years, and my daughter Caroline Quinones was attending South Pass Schools high school last. Of course, we're now in Nashville, so I want to say hello to everybody, including my neighbors on our beautiful street of Floral Park Terrace. I'm not sure how much time we have. It doesn't seem like we have very much, but I'll be kind of rushed. But basically, what's happened is that the Mexican trafficking world has transitioned to synthetic drugs from plant-based drugs. This change has been very quick. It was slow in coming, and then when it happened, it was very fast in the last few years. And so traffickers down there understand that the benefits of making your own drugs in a lab with chemicals only is far greater than anything you can grow. And that's what's happened. So they now make, they understand that they don't need, with synthetic drugs, you don't need land, you don't need sunshine or irrigation, you don't need large farming contingents. All you need is a port through which you can get chemicals. And this has changed the nature of the drugs coming out of Mexico, particularly because in Mexico on the Pacific Coast side, where they have lots and lots of, where basically Mexico's drug culture is rooted, they have two major shipping ports, and they can get all the world's chemicals that way. And this has led to enormous supplies of drugs coming in from Mexico. First really was methamphetamine, and then fentanyl was close behind that. And there's a long story about how they kind of discovered fentanyl, which they did not know anything about. But now very, very definitely do, and now in fact know how to make it. And so it used to be that the fentanyl, when we first saw it, was coming from China. China's government put a hold on that, and now you can't really produce fentanyl in China unless you're one of a few registered companies. And so, but they continue to send the chemicals to the world that they can make this stuff. And one of the main buyers of it are the folks in Mexico who are now making it. They have made so much of it that they were a few years back looking for ways to market this stuff. And that's when they began to make the pills. And that's the main way that what's happened to the pills in on the street has totally changed. These pills are now being made by, as Ed went into a great deal on pills and by the tens of millions really by now. They started in 2017. The first seizures of these pills was in 2017 in San Diego, and then also in Arizona. And they were a few thousand at a time. And then as the years have passed, 3-4 years have passed, you see these enormous supplies now. Last month or earlier, I guess this month in Culiacan, which is the capital city of the state of Sinaloa, they raided a middle-class house in which they found 118 kilos of fentanyl, and a lab that they estimate, the military down there estimates, could produce 70 kilos of fentanyl a month. That's 70 million of the pills that Ed was talking about. So the biggest issue became not the classic one that affected drug dealers, which was, where do I get my dope to sell? It became, where can I sell all this stuff that I have access to, and everybody has access to it now. And obviously social media during COVID became the major solution to all that. They could find a captive market, also offering to deliver. Frequently, my understanding is a lot of the times the dealers who deliver this, the social media is now a gateway drug for young trout dealers too. It's a way of getting big. You don't know where to sell it. One place it's easy and hidden and anonymous is on social media, and you can develop your capital. You can develop into a much larger dealer if you start that way. And so that is really the major change. They have covered the country, which is an amazing achievement, unprecedented achievement, both with methamphetamine and fentanyl, because once you have enough chemicals, you can make these drugs all year round. There's no seasons anymore, as there is with marijuana or poppies or what have you. And so you've got all this supply of chemicals, and you can make as much as you want. And the pills are simply a convenient way of smuggling them. And they understand, as Ed said, that this is an American love affair we have of pills. And so that's the main way in which, and answer your question, Jenny, that's the main way in which the pills on the street have changed.
Okay. So you've spent a lot of time personally meeting and talking to people out there on the street, as well as talking with treatment centers and shelters. Tell us a little bit about the new meth formulations. What have you seen? How has methamphetamine changed, and how is it affecting our communities?
Yes. So a few years ago, 2008 to be exact, the Mexican government made illegal a chemical called ephedrine, which had been used and very efficiently to make methamphetamine by the Mexican trafficking world. Ephedrine, you may know, is a decongestant. It's found in Sudafed pills, and it's a fairly common thing. And when they did that, the trafficking world in Mexico was pushed to change how they make methamphetamine. The methamphetamine that they're making now since 2008 is a much messier, smellier form of methamphetamine, but it has one benefit that ephedrine made meth doesn't have. And that is, you have a bunch of ways of making the precursor in this new method. This new method uses a chemical called phenyl 2-propanone, just call it P2P for short, very easy to remember. And this precursor, essential precursor, can be made many, many, many different ways, dozens of ways, I think, all with different chemicals, but all those chemicals are common, legal, very easily accessible and available in world markets, and very toxic. And so they began doing this, and the effect was to create the supply that I was referring to earlier. This stuff really began to amp up in enormous quantities in 2013-14 in Los Angeles. We began to see it all the West Coast, and then by 2017, it's in the Midwest, in Ohio, in Indiana and Tennessee, where we are now. By 2019, it's covered all the way to New England, which never had any method at all. This was an unprecedented thing for the underworld to achieve. You've never seen one source create enough drugs to cover the entire United States, including, frankly, Hawaii, matter of fact. But along with that, and so what they've also been able to do is drop the price. So the price is now 80% lower than it ever historically was. It's just remarkable supply achievement. The problem, all methods can be dangerous to your brain and so on, but this meth is accompanied by by something else that is of enormous importance to Southern California and really the rest of the country. And that is that it is accompanied by very quick, rapid onset symptoms of schizophrenia. And that this would be a very intense paranoia, very vivid hallucinations, inability to really be around other people. And so what it also leads to very quickly is homelessness. And so it leads very quickly to mental illness and homelessness. And I believe very, very quickly as well, one of the main reasons behind the tent encampments that we have today all over, well, in all parts of the country, is this new methamphetamine. The tent is a perfect lodging for a person who is so mentally unbalanced as to think everybody's out to get them. There's no chance that person's going to live in an apartment or house while he's in this unbalanced state. There's also no chance that person's ever going to spend a night in a homeless shelter, which is a terrifying experience to people who are on this meth and rendered this kind of mentally ill. And so what ends up happening is that tents become perfect lodging. They're a place where you can be away from the world all by yourself, nobody else around you. And my feeling is very strongly that a lot of the tent encampments that we've seen really, and the mental illness and the homelessness that we have seen, has been driven by this just colossal and staggering supplies of methamphetamine that are now, in this new way of making it, that are now coming out of Mexico over the last, certainly since 2013, 14, in the Los Angeles area. It's I believe, a story that goes all across the country. It's creating homelessness in areas without any problem of high price of housing like we have in Los Angeles. And in my book, I write about the community of Clarksburg, West Virginia, where a Rust Belt town where there is seriously no problem of finding cheap housing, and it has created homelessness, unprecedented homelessness in that community. I write the story about that. So that is our new meth situation. But all of this is part of this move away from plant-based drugs and toward synthetic drugs made with chemicals, and those chemicals available through those ports from world markets.
Okay, thank you. So I guess my last question before we go to questions from our audience for you, Sam, is what do you think the future looks like, given that there's basically no stopping the supply of pills pouring in and new synthetic drugs pouring in? What do you think we could do to prevent fentanyl poisonings and death? Like, what can we do as a community? How can we be hopeful here?
Well, I would say one thing, I have to push back a little bit on that. I would say that there are solutions to this problem, but they come in the form of binational collaboration between the two governments and the employees of those governments. And the employees I think are ready to collaborate. Whether or not the higher ups are ready for that is another question entirely. I lived in Mexico for 10 years. And Mexico has never really seriously addressed this issue of corruption and drug trafficking in its midst, which is creating such problems now. We have never addressed the very serious problem that we have of gun sales those guns being very easily smuggled down to Mexico, which ensures the impunity of all those folks to make the dope the way they make it. I would say, though, that as always in my books, the focus has always been on community and on developing connections among ourselves. I really believe now that's more important than ever. It's more important at the high school level too. What it really requires of us all is a far closer attention to what's going on, at high school parties. I do believe now, in elementary school, we're all very close to each other's, to our the parents of other kids who were in our kids' classes, and it was very easy to be part of that. Once you get to junior high and especially to high school, it becomes a very different situation. So it seems to me we really need to work hard develop the connections between among the parents in our kids' friends group to be able to understand who they are, what kinds of, if they're going to a party, what that party is going to entail, who's going to be there, what kind of supervision there's going to be there. It's a kind of a community, it takes a village kind of attitude. To me, that's always where this opioid epidemic and these drug scourges are always pushing us, reminding us of how far away we got from community, from where we're also isolated. Even in a town like South Pasadena, which I think does a little bit better job than many other places, we are still too isolated. We are still too distant from the people that our kids hang out with. And I think the town is small enough so we can achieve that. We can find each other's parents. We can have these conversations with our kids. We can also be very clear that this is a supply story, right? So we need to understand, we need to be very clear if our kids are around people or hear of people selling this stuff. That needs to be absolutely top of mind. This is, as Ed said, it's just like Russian roulette. And so these pills are extraordinarily deadly. And the truth is, we've all grown up, I think, I'm 62, so I grew up in the 70s and so on. And we all grew up with these scare and sensationalized ideas about what drugs are. And meetings with teachers and about how, but the thing is this, though, here's the thing: myth has become reality. That's all that stuff, all those things that they said about drugs back in the 70s, 50s, 30s, even, those old movies, Reefer Madness, we have to laugh at and scoff at. Oh, that's nonsense. It was nonsense at that time. Now it's not. It's all absolutely based on data, on fact, on examples like Ed's son and thousands and thousands of others. This is the reality now. It's not a sensational alarmist idea. I'm trying to be not as alarmist as I could be, frankly, because I don't want to be part of that tradition. But the truth that grew up around drugs in America. But I also have to say that this is absolutely happening, and it is not a joke. And it is all of this stuff is happening not because there's a demand for it here, right? It's happening because all of this is in the interest of drug traffickers, and that's why it'll be around for a while. Making drugs this way in pills and so on, and synthetically and all that is less risky, easier, cheaper. You can smuggle them more easily, and there's an enormous market waiting to be created by all this, and so this is the world we live in. And I think we cannot do enough. We always need to do more to strengthen the community bonds that are on our street. And certainly in high school, when kids began having friendships that are far away from our street or nearby, we absolutely need to have communication, deep communication, not eye-to-eye, face-to-face communication with each other, with their parents, to understand, what can we do? Who can we talk to? Who these people are? Do we want to have our kids over at their house? That kind of thing. This is not. This is the time for that, because that's what this scourge is telling us, is that we have gotten so far away from community bonds and connection that we're all kind of isolated, and moving on from that is a very important thing to do.
Yeah, you mentioned to me when I spoke to you earlier that our worst nightmare is that 4 kids at the high school are going to pass one night because we weren't paying attention. It's very serious. So thank you. Kristen, I think, do you have any questions?
I do. I have a few questions.
Okay.
I think they're mostly going to be for Sam. So I'm going to start with you. And if we get more, I will move over to anybody else. The first question was asked by a couple different people, so I'll try and summarize it. But basically, can you explain why they're putting fentanyl in drugs when it's a killer, and that just makes them not make money anymore? It sounds like a really crass question, but it doesn't make sense.
It's a classic question. It's one question that everybody has, and there are very good reasons why on the street you would want to mix fentanyl with methamphetamine or cocaine. They don't have anything to do with consumer demand or anything like that, but they just have to do, again, with business interests of traffickers. So what fentanyl was, a lot of this has to do with the fact that fentanyl is made in just staggering quantities right now. Okay, so it's like salt. Think of it like salt. We put on salt on food and stuff. Well, trafficking world has learned to just mix it into any drug that they have. First started with heroin, of course, back in 2015. And so we began to see heroin. Well, that made sense because they were both opioids. But now, in the last couple of years, and certainly, well, I think before that, they began to understand on the street dealers now began to understand that they could put it in anything and it would boost the potency or the kick of whatever they were selling, and crucial in all this. So that's one reason you want to boost. If you have cocaine, it comes up from Colombia, it's been stepped down about 4 or 5 times. Well, you add some fentanyl to it and all of a sudden it's a little bit of a boost, but there's more to that really, because once you add fentanyl to cocaine, you very quickly get an opioid addict. You get a new consumer who will buy from you every single day, okay? Because opioid addicts need dope every day to keep the withdrawals and the dope sickness away. And heroin won't do it anymore. Heroin's vanishing from our streets because it's just not potent enough to keep up with the addiction that fentanyl creates. And so instead of a cocaine user who might buy from you maybe 2-3 times a week, you now have somebody who buys from you at least every day and sometimes more than once a day. The other point is that it's very important to understand too, that among people, once people are addicted, when you haven't died from fentanyl, you develop a tolerance and it begins to grow. Once people are addicted to fentanyl, which is now the case in many, many parts of the country now, okay, so it's no longer that people know what they're using is not heroin or cocaine anymore. They know it's fentanyl. At a certain point, a death becomes not a warning, but an advertisement. And this has been true of the heroin using world for decades. This is not new at all. That you're chasing that high you once had the first time, and pretty soon what you're doing is you're looking for anything that is as strong. And so when someone dies, that's a sign that that dope is pretty damn powerful. So let's go get that, right? This is a common thing. And so, for example, I was just interviewing a woman in Eastern Tennessee addicted to fentanyl, and she's quite aware of it. And she told her wholesaler, look, when you buy, wherever you're buying, wherever you go to buy this stuff, I'm going to give you fentanyl strips, right? To test the stuff that you buy, because I want you to make sure that it has fentanyl in it. We won't buy anything that doesn't have fentanyl in it anymore, right? So you get, this is a new demand. It's like a customer expansion move. And if a few people die along the way, it's not because in many areas, it's still not considered murder, or it's still not prosecuted as murder. A lot of people don't think it's, there's no consequences to it. Now, more and more people are doing that, or more and more DAs are doing that. But of course, LA's is not. But I think the only way to really convince dealers not to do that is to start charging people with murder once they sell somebody a drug with fentanyl in it, because it's the only thing that trafficking world understands. I'm sorry, there's just good wishes that don't work. And so this is why you're seeing it. But it's also true that this is the first time in the history of drug use that we have seen drug trafficking profits, and enormous ones at that, lottery ticket type profits, connected to people's ability to mix meth. I'm sorry, fentanyl. Sorry about that. Fentanyl. And so when you have that, that's why people have become, kind of used to now mixing fentanyl with almost anything. And we're seeing it now in little by little. I don't want to overstate the case, but certainly we're seeing examples of this, of fentanyl included somehow in marijuana. And so all of that is why there's other reasons having to do with what Mexico might not care, because they're major producers. They don't really think about the people who are using this. They just want to make some money, that kind of thing. But there's good reasons, in quotation marks, for the business world why you would want to mix all this stuff, even though you would risk a death.
Thank you. Did you mention the fentanyl strips that person that you interviewed, did those actually work, or is that something?
Yeah, no, those there are strips you can get, and actually for people who are not addicted to fentanyl, it's not a bad idea. I mean, it's a harm reduction idea to, if you have cocaine, to test your cocaine with these strips, and it tests for fentanyl. I don't know if it tests for all fentanyls, because there's not just one fentanyl. There's numerous analogs. There's hundreds of them. As I talk about in my book, the guy who invented fentanyl understood this. By the way, I want to say this. Fentanyl is a fantastic drug, okay? When used medically, it is magnificent. I've had fentanyl. I had a heart attack 4 years ago. They gave me fentanyl in the hospital. It revolutionized surgery. It is a magnificent use in medicine. The problem is because it is so potent. The problem is because it's so potent, it is extraordinarily dangerous in the wrong hands, which is where it finds itself right now.
So
Hey,
you
Kristen,
mentioned
do you mind if I comment on the fentanyl test strip thing?
Yeah.
My friends on the line will know that this is a real issue for me. To me, this is an example of how society has not quite gotten their arms around this problem, because fentanyl test strips test liquids. You cannot test
Yes.
a pill. This is an example of, well, we have something that works in the harm reduction community for heroin addicts. It makes a lot of sense to test your shot before you inject, so that you know if it's fentanyl in there and you change how you ingest the drug. That's a very good harm reduction tactic. I've become convinced that there are good ways to really reduce your risk depending on how you test a sample of your cocaine. But for a pill, because of this thing called the chocolate chipping effect, you can't test part of the pill and know that the rest of the pill is fentanyl free. And you cannot test one of these and know that this one doesn't have anything in it, but one of these isn't completely loaded with enough fentanyl to kill 5 people, because uneven batch mixing is a big part of the problem, right? So one of the things when we're talking about high school age kids and pills, we're concerned about sending any mixed signals. If anybody says you can trust these pills, they're tested, my guy tests his pills, that's not true. Because if it's in pill form, it hasn't been tested. You have to turn this into a liquid and then drink your pill in order for the test to work. So we got to be careful with fentanyl test strips and pills.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's great. So you mentioned that it's been seen in marijuana a little bit too. My sister's a nurse. Kind of what she told me recently was just the good thing about legalizing marijuana. And I just was wondering if you could speak to this, was when you get it legally, it is mixed correctly, it is dosed correctly. Would you not say that's true? Or would you say
I don't, we have mangled this thing so badly in California, it's a joke. There is no inspection of this marijuana. Okay, I'm not saying that the examples of people having bought and used marijuana with fentanyl in it haven't happened in California, haven't heard of this. But the truth is, we have done this so badly in this state that, what was the main issue of the main lesson of the opioid epidemic? Be careful. Be careful what drug that is legal, that is very potent, is made widely available with outlandish claims about its risk-free nature. That's the lesson one of the lessons of the opioid epidemic, and that is exactly what we're doing with pot. Outrageously potent pot, no check. This is supposedly a consumable. Do we have any place where we are inspecting those gummy bears? We're inspecting the buds that are for sale in these dispensaries that supposedly are getting them from reliable places. We don't know if that's true either. We don't have, if it's a medicine is inspected in very rigorous ways in laboratories. None of that is happening. None of that is happening. On the contrary, we are seeing dispensaries complain that they have to pay taxes because they face competition from illegal marijuana growers and traffickers. Well, so what it actually means is we have not understood that by legalizing marijuana, we actually have to put more people in prison for marijuana sales, because in order to make sure that the dispensaries are abiding by the law and do not face unfair competition from dealers who are not paying taxes, who don't have shops, who don't have lights and electricity to pay, None of that has happened. And, you know, we need to make sure that those folks are not in business. But we didn't consider any of this kind of stuff when we passed these first the medical marijuana law, and then the other one that passed the legalization, which I didn't vote for. To me, it feels like we don't know what's in the stuff. And I'm not saying that it includes fentanyl. So far, I don't think there's been a case of that in California. Could be wrong. Happy to be corrected on that. But the problem is we just don't know anything about the marijuana. It's not like we know, you know, what is in a can of beans. We know that we have some trust that has been, you know, inspected, and that's a clean place, and that's, you know, and it doesn't include something that'll kill us. The truth is we don't know any of that because we have botched the job of legalizing marijuana from the very beginning, in my opinion. And there's many reasons we could go into a long discourse about why and what the problems are with legal marijuana, but we don't know that stuff hasn't been bought by some guy out from the, you know, some guy coming around to the back door of the dispensary saying, hey, you want to buy a kilo of this? We don't know that.
So you mentioned that California has botched it. Are there states that have legalized it that have not botched it? Because we're sending our kids to college.
Yes, I'm not aware of one. You know, the whole idea was, you know, the idea is with marijuana. See, we also blew the main lesson from Prohibition. During Prohibition, there grew up an entire industry of illegal hooch, right? Bathtub hooch, make you all kind of, you know, twitch and blind and all that kind of stuff. We ended Prohibition, the Volstead Act, in 1933. We never once for a moment considered that we would legalize for commercial sale all this kind of semi-toxic junk that people were making in their bathtubs. That was never, ever going to be part of the mix. On the contrary, we legalized it, and we, with a keen eye towards potency. Well, the hyper-potent pot of today is the counterpart, the marijuana counterpart to the bathtub hooch. It's invented. It only exists because it was illegal. It only exists because some underground botanist figured out how to hybridize this and that and the other thing and come up with this mutant plant. That has nothing to do with really outdoor grown marijuana. At the same time, we are allowing marijuana to be grown indoors in a time of climate change. Imagine the carbon footprint of a factory, say in Oakland somewhere, where you can grow this stuff indoors with electricity humming the whole time and lights on for 16 hours a day to replicate the sun. To me, all of this is, you know, I mean, I don't see Colorado or Washington or Oregon, to just name the closest states to us, have done any better on this issue. There's no attempt to regulate potency. There's no attempt to really inspect what we're selling. None of that, it seems to me. And so therefore, at least in California, it seems to me that we have not gotten rid of the illegal black market of marijuana.
Thank you. Somebody said they've heard of an antidote shot, kind of like an EpiPen, that can stop the deadly effect of fentanyl, that can be purchased over the counter. Have you heard of that? And is that?
It's called Narcan. It's called Narcan. It's also chemically or scientifically known as naloxone. My understanding is, yes, you can buy this, and it's very effective. I would say what the problem is with fentanyl, that you need many shots. Typically, one shot of fentanyl is not. One shot of Narcan is enough to revive you from an overdose of heroin or maybe an opioid painkiller if that's what you're on, but not enough for fentanyl. You do need several. And the problem with Narcan, there's not a problem with the substance itself. It's extraordinarily effective and very important to have around, and I think needs to be around like fire extinguishers in a restaurant. You know, you always want it available wherever you are. Very important to have that. But that it doesn't really solve the problem. You know, eventually that person may overdose when there is no Narcan around. And so it's not to say, people say, well, we've revived 1,000 people, say. Many people have been revived on Narcan numerous times, and that doesn't mean that no death has occurred. That means that no death occurred right then. And many a time you find people who are then, because it's only like the most immediate Band-Aid on the person's very serious problem, which is the overdose is an absolute red flag. This person has a very serious problem. The proof of it is he's overdosing on whatever it is, heroin or fentanyl or whatever. And remember that fentanyl is, normally requires 5, 6, 7, paramedics have told me sometimes 8 shots of Narcan.
And Kristen, again, just to chime in the specific problem that we think about with younger, more naive kids, one of the things that really is not safe anymore is self-medication. So you got to have somebody to administer the Narcan. And so if our kids get in the habit of I'm not feeling great, I'm going to go in my room and close the door and pop a pill that I got online, no Narcan is going to save them. That's a behavior we really have to warn our kids against. In the harm reduction community, they'll say, don't use alone and make sure you have Narcan on you. But a lot of these young people, they're self-medicating and isolating, and Narcan doesn't do you any good if you're alone in your bedroom.
And I would say also that assumes what Ed said is correct, and it also assumes this kind of harm reduction approach to this is it assumes that people are behaving rationally when they're about to shoot up. The very act of using drugs is to deny the most powerful parts of our brain that have evolved to keep us alive. All in favor, hijacking the part of the brain in favor of drug use. And so there is no rational thinking. If there were, people wouldn't be living in tents. They wouldn't be living under the overpass. They wouldn't be stealing silver from their grandmother who read them books when they were 5. There is the idea that there's somehow rational behavior taking place. A lot of times, I'm not sure I understand where people think that comes from.
Can I jump in real quick? Sam and I discussed that one possible thing that we could do to help is within our health classes in the high school. Do you want to speak about that, Sam? Talking a little bit about neuroscience. Sure.
Yes, it's a very important thing, I think, and I believe that this is a pathway towards real deeper understanding and a more maybe rational choice on the part of our kids. And that is, we know so much today about the human brain. In my book, I spent a lot of time speaking with neuroscientists. It's fascinating work. I'm a layman, absolutely. I don't claim to fully understand everything there is to know. And so what I wrote was enough to kind of explain the addiction brain, how the brain works, when it's addicted to these substances and that kind of thing. But I would say that we know so much that we ought to make use of it. I think high school health classes in particular would be well served by an 8-week unit in maybe freshman year and then junior year or something like that, on how the brain works. And there's such vivid imagery and we can ask questions of the brain, about the brain now that we never could imagine asking 20 years ago. I mean, as recently as that. What does the brain look like on prayer? What does the brain look like on storytelling? What does the brain look like on coffee? What does the brain look like on methamphetamine or high potency marijuana? What does the brain look like on seeing a cute little puppy, right? I mean, all of these things are measurable and to some degree knowable, and that we have not used this enormous body of information that has been developed by neuroscientists across the country and really around the world, frankly, in any way to our benefit, and we need to use that. I believe that a great 8-week course on how the brain works will lead kids to naturally understand the dangers of this. Now, whether or not that may not dissuade everyone from using, but to me, the most powerful explanation of why you would not want to use drugs doesn't come from a person telling you not to use drugs. It comes from a neuroscientist who says, This is how our brain functions. This is how our brain functions most clearly. And this is what it looks like when it's on prayer or storytelling. And this is what it looks like when it's on meth or marijuana or heroin or fentanyl or whatever. And so I think I would strongly urge that this is now the time for this kind of class to be taught in our high schools. It is so important, and giving kids the understanding. What I find too is when you understand how the brain works, it allows you not to be a free person. To understand what it takes to be a free person. To not be captured by this dope, which is an enslaving situation, and a conformist thing. Everybody must conform to what the dope wants, and you see that in the behavior of lots of addicts. They just kind of seem all to behave the same way. I think that this is a kind of just a wonderful opportunity to use those neuroscientists we have all over and start these kinds of education that our kids need.
Great, thank you. So I think we were trying to end by 8:20, but we have a bunch of questions still. So if I end by 8:30, are we good, everybody? I just want to let everybody know.
Sure.
One person was asking what are, sorry, I lost the question. So I'm gonna try and figure it out. What are names of drugs? Like, what are the slang terms kids are using for any drugs that are out there? So we all think our kids are not doing anything because they're not talking to us. And then we realize they probably are. So if we hear anything like certain words, are there words we should kind of think about?
I think Ed would be the one to address that. He had some interesting graphics, I think, that he can show.
Well, I don't know if I got the graphics on those. There are some floating around, and I can certainly get them to you guys. Okay. Some of the other parents have put together some useful infographics that show all the different slang terms. The emoji for a plug, the drug dealer is known as a plug. And so the emoji for like an electrical plug, the end of a cord, is something you definitely should look out for, right? So now what the slang terms are for the specific drugs, there's a chart floating around out there that we can get you that'll help.
That would be great. We can put that on our PTSA newsletter when we send out the video. So that would be.
There's a group. There's a group. I'm like kind of. There's a group called Stop the Void. Victims of I can't remember drugs. StopTheVoid.com, and they have. I'm pretty sure they have these all the emojis and all that kind of stuff that go along with those. And so that's one place you can look, stopthevoid.com.
Fantastic. Since I've got you back, Sam, any predictions on future innovations that could be risky for youth after fake pills like fentanyl and vape or other new synthetics that you're worried about?
You know, I get very leery about predicting the future as a journalist. I'm not sure that it's necessarily the best occupation. I do pretty well describing what was and what is. What comes next, you know, geez, I got really no idea. I think what we need to focus on really is just right now. These pills are very scary, and that there is, you know, people. I put up on Twitter one time. That there was these cases of people mixing marijuana and fentanyl, and of course the marijuana advocacy community gets very upset at that, and oh, what's your source and that kind of thing. Well, it's people I talked to who are addicts on the street, you know. But but their feeling was, well, that would never happen under legalized marijuana, and I'm like, well, why not? You know, what is keeping it from happening? To my way of thinking, there is no moral compass that guides people. Some dealers there are. I've met folks who've done this, and they're like, I don't want to really sell that because it's so bad. You know, I wouldn't do that. Maybe they wouldn't. people do have moral compasses, but frequently the money and being around drugs just numb those compasses. And so why we would not begin to see lots of marijuana with fentanyl in it, I'd have no reason to think it would not happen.
Okay, thank you.
I think, Kristen, there's a safe prediction to make about the future.
Yeah.
And we've kind of said it already. I think this shift from the farm to the lab is here to stay. So they're going to keep messing around. I mean, Sam talks about in his book that I'm putting this in my own words now, but you know, the old days, it was the image of a marijuana farmer, you know, slowly changing the properties of his crop of generations of breeding. And now the image I have in my head are these like amateur mad scientists in a basement somewhere cooking up stuff and trying different cocktails of synthetic chemicals. So that, I think, is not going to change. The resulting substances are going to be way more volatile than we've ever dealt with in the past. And I think that's a prediction I'm willing to make.
Yeah, super scary. I'm going to switch over to Sadie. We have a couple questions for you, Sadie. One is the ASB Wellness team hearing from students about pill abuse?
Yeah, so that's a great question. We haven't heard a lot about pill use at South Pass, but I don't doubt it that it's happening.
Okay. And then another question for you. Will this information, it's got multiple questions. Will this information help your peers avoid fake pills and other dangerous drugs? And what do you think they need to make good choices in addition to mental health support?
That I can only hope that these resources will help. Like, I can't guarantee that, but I do think that like the accessibility and like making sure that kids are aware that these resources exist, that these people exist that they can talk to, is a great like first step to avoid substance use. So I can't guarantee anything about like healthy behaviors, good choices, but I can guarantee that these like resources are out there and that they can help avoid and prevent substance use.
Great, thank you. There was one question asking if we are presenting this, showing this to the students at the school. Jenny, I don't think there's a plan for that. This was kind of the way that we were getting it out to the school. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, I mean, there's absolutely no plan to do that. This is kind of our first effort to reach out and include students in this conversation rather than it just coming top down. Like, let them be part of the initial discussion. I guess we'll just have to see. But this is what PTSA is our effort to try to create awareness and help.
Yep, that's great. And then just on the mental health front, for anybody out there, I think between PTSA and the Challenge Success Committee, that is going to start doing more and more with nightly talks or monthly talks. We're really hoping to work with the school on some of the mental health stuff. That's the whole goal of Challenge Success, is to make sure the kids are really successful in school, and a lot of has to do with their mental health as well. So one maybe last question, hopefully. Is it true that you can overdose on fentanyl simply by touching it? Sam.
Well, there are police officers who assure me that their colleagues have. There is a feeling among harm reductionists and people in science that doesn't happen. I would say that it's far more likely to inhale dust, particulate in the air. Once you open a car trunk and there's a box and you open the trunk and you get that kind of stuff, up in the air, then yeah, absolutely. I think that's very easy to do, depending on what's in that box, of course. It's not clear to me that how many cases of that of actually touching it through the skin and so on have happened. But these drugs are just so potent. I mean, with carfentanil is a kind of a fentanyl analog. It's extraordinarily, it's more potent than any other of the others. And, you know, that's what the Russian government used to kill those Chechen terrorists in that movie theater in 2003 in Moscow, along with a bunch of hostages. They just put it through the air ducts, and it killed everybody in the room who wasn't close to a door. And so these are things that you don't have to be intentionally wanting to use under certain circumstances for them to affect you.
Okay, this could either be for Sam or Ed, or maybe both of you. If you were to be talking to your 10, 13, 15, 17-year-old, how would you talk to them about drugs and alcohol at this point with all of the knowledge that you have? Can you give advice on what you would say? I know that's not what all of us would say, but I'd love to hear what you would say to your kids at this point. To, you know, I have friends who say, just don't touch it. And, you know, it's hard because parents are touching it. I mean, at least alcohol, parents are touching it all the time. They're showing you that it's normal, it's okay. So I'm just curious what your advice would be.
My daughter, Caroline, has been hearing about this stuff for the last 10 years as I've been writing about it in 2 books. I think she's heard too much, really too much now, honestly. And so she's asleep right now, I hope, upstairs. Okay, so I hope she's not listening to this, because she's heard this from age 7 or something like that. I think it's been a long time. I do believe in not scaring, but telling facts, and showing. Hold on one second, and showing that you know, the real world effects. You don't have to go too far. You could take a walk down any tent encampment and you could see the effects of this stuff. People like to think homelessness has a lot to do with high cost of housing, and it may in some cases, but I don't think the folks in tent encampments are the prime examples of that. I think it's more the drugs that we're talking about. I believe, I would tell you this, that this is the way I kind of view what's going on. I believe that not praising kids for things they don't achieve for no reason, for demanding they work, for demanding they do things around the house, for absolutely getting exercise, not driving them to school, you know, being active. There's a lot of neuroscience that shows the enormous influence of exercise, healthy, positive influence of exercise on almost every part of our life, and certainly this one as well. Making people understand that you don't get something for nothing. I think that's the great promise of drugs. And that could be around the house, chores, doing things, not just being given stuff because you just happen to be the apple of my eye, that kind of thing. I think we raised kids like that long ago, and I'm not sure we do that very much anymore. You know, what can I tell kids? What can I tell my daughter about this stuff? She sees it, so she's not immune from it. And then letting, and not stepping in whenever she has a problem, that she learns to solve problems herself, and not kind of, you know, any little friend problems that she has, that's her deal. She deals with it. She moves on. She has somebody who doesn't treat her right, she moves on, you know, that kind of thing. I think I know this gets far away from what the questioner asked, but to me, this is all part of this larger question of how we have raised children in America. And that's families that are lucky enough to have two parents at home without any issues, without any, you know, all the other problems that come along with it, you know. So I believe that it goes far beyond what I would tell my daughter. And I would think it would have to do with the understanding that my wife and I have about what we let her deal with on her own. Life-threatening things are no, but issues that have to do with personal relationships, work, walking to school, all of that kind of stuff. Stop. You know, I'd love to see parents in South Pass stop driving their kids to school. I mean, I think that's part of like the whole idea here that, get kids to fend for themselves a little bit. And then they will become stronger, I think, when it comes to these kinds of crucial decisions that you're not going to be around when they make. Just one idea.
That's great.
I'd love to take a shot at that one.
Please.
Because I'm in the same vein as Sam is. I would counsel young people today by pushing back, trying to rebalance what we've done in our culture to glamorize intoxication in general. We have this live for the weekend mentality. And with social media and all the pressures, there's been surveys shown now where you ask kids what they want to be when they grow up, and the number one answer is YouTube influencer. So the materialism, the shallowness, do what you can to make a ton of money so you can have really cool jewelry and party your whole life long is really, we need to rebalance that. We need to push against that. That is not what life is about ultimately. And, I love this saying that says, prepare the child for the road, not the road for the child. A lot of us know firsthand that, life involves a lot of pain and struggle and tough stuff. And part of the kids' depression and anxiety these days comes from setting this expectation that there's a pot of gold out there and an ongoing rave party 24/7 somewhere. And we have to, I would tell my young, hopefully one day grandchild, you do not have to aspire to that. There are more important things in life. Get small, find a partner who will put up with you, build a life, have a family of your own. I think we put expectations on our kids about you're going to be the one to cure cancer or, fix climate change. I'm going to tell my grandkids, no, you're not. Just take care of yourself, right? Tend your own garden and don't chase this live for the weekend mentality, this hedonism that we seem to have promote everywhere in popular culture and maybe even in our homes, So that's kind of how I think about it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ed. I am going to end with Sadie. One parent suggested that I actually turn this to Sadie, the same question, which is kind of turning it on its head. What would be effective for teens to hear from their parents?
That's a tough question. And I agree with both Ed and Sam, but I also think it is about like providing your kids with resources and talking about mental health, talking about physical health, talking about sexual health, as awkward as it might be. Like that is the conversations that we should be having with our kids, is making sure that, not our kids, with your kids, making sure that they have the resources that they need to stay safe. I think it's like really tough to have conversations with kids just from personal experience, like about drugs and alcohol, because it's so touchy and it seems kind of weird coming from a parent. But I think that's like how the conversation has started, is it started with you, and it started with, making sure that they have resources, making sure that they're aware of the resources that they have, and so they don't have to turn to substances. So that's kind of like the best advice I could give from my perspective. It's definitely difficult though. I get that.
That's great. No, we love hearing your perspective. Thank you so much. That's all I have for questions. There's 2 comments in here I just wanted to read. And one of them I think speaks for all of us, that thank you for opening our minds up to an issue we didn't realize. So thank you, Jenny. Thank you to Sam, Sadie, and Ed. This is a real eye opener for us and we really appreciate it. And the second one is, we just want to just share with Ed how deeply sorry we are for your loss. And I know your story could totally be our story, as one of the parents put, and I completely agree with that. And I cannot thank you enough for coming here to speak to us and sharing that with us, because hopefully, I guarantee what you're doing is going to save so many lives. So thank you so much.
Thank you all. Thanks very much.
Yeah. I'm going to turn it back to Jenny now.
That's exactly what I was going to say, is that we hope that we can maybe save some lives just by having this conversation. And we really appreciate all of you for coming and listening tonight. This recording will be available on our SPHS PTSA YouTube channel in about a week, if you'd like to share it with anybody. Thank
The
you.
other thing is Sam just sent me his email and I'm going to put it in the chat. So if anybody would like to reach out to Sam, he has offered that. So if you have any follow-up questions you'd like to email him with, just look in the chat. I'm going to put that right now. And thank you.
Good night.